So now it's the first Q&A session of the day. You are free to ask some questions to the previous speakers. Thank you.
Okay, great question. So, who funds deep? We have a founder. We have a founder that understands that our vision and mission and deep as a company is more important than who's funding it. And so wants to be anonymous, obviously a person of means, and has created a 200-year generational company with generational funding, and wants it to be more about the mission and the people than themselves, and so therefore they like to remain anonymous. Even if I told you who it was, you'd have to get 25 pages into Google. No one you would know. But great question, by the way. Nuno? Yeah. So that's, yeah. Because so why not just use the current technology of a $250,000 a day boat and a bell that three of us are like this in it for 8 hours working? Because if you look at 60s to now, saturation diving is the history of commercial oil and gas and military. And there's a component where we are really trying to open up the oceans to exploration, and that means a diverse group of people. Now, I could be in saturation with my friend here, sitting on the toilet while he's eating food, and between us is a towel. Military and commercial oil and gas divers won't mind that inconvenience because they're making $3,000 a day. But a research scientist is not going to want to do with that. We want people to go back, and not the motive being money, but the motive being science. So offering a habitat that has a diverse range of users, that has a level of comfort is important, but also the freedom, and not be tethered to the surface in a schedule that says, I have to go back up now for my decompression into a white metal container that's not very fun to live in. So we want research scientists, after their mission, to want to go back, not because they're motivated by the money, but they're motivated by the fidelity of the science that they can do. And so that's why we're trying to put them down there so that they can decide when they want to do their exploration and not be beholden to someone on the ship who's got them on a schedule.
If I may add to you, this idea of putting people on the sea bottom instead of having them link it to the surface, and as answering Nuno, is also linked with this idea that I pointed in initial, that we want to have less dependent of costly deployment operations. So either because we have the divers there and the scientists here, I think this is the idea of not having you. For you it's easy, for me it's not. So the way is how can you aspire to do things that you can do, only you can do, but I can't. So in an easier way than in a low-cost way. So this idea that we have people on the sea bottom, so I can have systems around it, either robots or divers. I think this is something interesting. Well, for me it is for sure.
Okay. I have two questions, one for Kirk, one for José. Kirk, power for the system underwater, and
Yep.
air that we're breathing, O2. What is your plan to do? Are you going to pull it with a small nuclear generator, or are you going to go with a battery-powered system?
Yeah, no, a great question. How are we going to power it? How are we going to maintain our gases? So the general concept you have to realize is that both underwater habitats, Vanguard and Sentinel, actually have the capability of autonomy. They don't need to be tethered to the surface. Sentinel system certainly will have an umbilical that offers communication We will have regenerative energy capabilities, wind, solar, whatever it would be, but the power for it will be housed in battery packs that will be down there for the duration mission plus a reserve into that. So what you don't see in our graphics is off to the side actual battery banks that would sit on the ocean floor, separate of the habitat from a safety point of view. And then the gases will also be there. So, you know, the gases from a saturation and mixed gas point of view, if we're at 200 meters, we're talking about 2% oxygen and 98% helium. That habitat sentinel system is, the large one is 400 cubic meters in volume. That's a lot of helium. And as we understand, helium prices today are quite expensive. So actually looking forward as a company, the idea is to look at the helium as a market, figuring out spot pricing and figuring out how we can smooth the lines for us as a large company needing large volumes of helium. So everything is meant to be autonomous in the system. We back it up with an umbilical to the surface. And then we also have hyperbaric lifeboats that sit on the habitat, and refuges off on the seafloor should we have failure of the habitat or a noxious environment, we can move to a refuge, or we can go into the hyperbaric lifeboat, 6 people, 96 hours, until the support vessel, which doesn't have to be $250,000 a day, big, massive systems, but appropriate for what it is we're doing because we have the autonomy at depth. I hope that answered it.
It did, thank you. Jose, when are we getting voice integration in the, so I can just tell my computer that it...
I couldn't hear.
When do we get voice integration so that I can just tell my computer, I've got 32%, or I've got 21% of 2?
So, great question. So, when we think about dive computers and the evolution of dive computers, what we're trying to do is make them better, but with less power consumption. So every time we add systems, we generate more consumption. In a dive, we have restricted means to charge batteries and so on and so forth. So that would be against our philosophy of simple, powerful, and reliable, because we don't have yet good voice controls. I mean, transferring data underwater, it's not easy. It takes a lot of power, and that could undermine other more important systems, which is depth and simple information. So maybe in 10 or 15 years, but I can't see it in the, in the next years, anything like that, just because of power consumption and creating more issues than solutions.